The sky bled red over Neo-Tokyo as timepieces across the city simultaneously skipped forward 3 minutes. For most citizens, it meant little more than adjusting their schedules. For Dr. Lyra Vance, it signaled that humanity had just lost another 72 million collective hours of existence. She stood atop the temporal observatory, her father's old pocket watch clutched in her palm. Unlike the city's synchronized chronometers, this antique remained stubbornly accurate, immune to the time dilation effect plaguing Earth. A gift from another era, another world, one where seconds still marched in predictable procession. "Fourth skip this month," said a voice behind her. Maya Alvarez approached, her temporal security uniform gleaming against the crimson horizon. "The council is panicking." "They should be," Lyra replied, her eyes still fixed on the city's impossible skyline, buildings that stretched and compressed with the irregular flow of time. "At this rate, we'll lose a full day by next quarter." The world of 2187 teetered on the edge of chronological collapse. What had begun as minor temporal anomalies, odd seconds vanishing here and there, had accelerated into a full-blown crisis. The aging population grew older faster than they should, while children experienced sudden growth spurts overnight. Day and night expanded and contracted unpredictably, throwing ecosystems into chaos. And Dr. Lyra Vance knew exactly why. 6 months ago, her father, the brilliant physicist Professor Victor Vance, had died trying to prove his theory. Someone or something was stealing time from the present. Maya handed Lyra a slim datapad. "The Chronological Agency just issued new orders. Priority Omega." Lyra's eyebrows shot up. "Omega? They've never declared temporal emergency before." "There's more," Maya continued, her voice dropping. "They're activating the Chronos Hunters." The Chronos Hunters, the agency's elite but controversial unit, specialized in chronological operations that most considered unethical at best, criminal at worst. Their mission: to retrieve time from the future to stabilize the present. Temporal theft, sanctioned by desperate governments. And Lyra, as head of Temporal Physics Division, was about to become their newest commander. The observatory's circular chamber hummed with tension as Lyra addressed her newly assembled team. Holographic displays showed cascading timelines, each one more unstable than the last. "The situation is worse than we thought," she began, manipulating the projection to highlight a massive disruption pattern. "We've detected a chronological shock wave forming in the temporal current. At current acceleration, it will engulf Earth in exactly 72 hours. Jin Shadow Tao, the team's chronological hacker, whistled low. "What happens when it hits?" "Total temporal collapse," Lyra replied grimly. "Time will effectively stop for 98% of the population. The remaining 2% will experience extreme acceleration, living entire lifetimes in what feels like minutes to them." "That's billions of people frozen in time," Maya calculated, her security training giving way to genuine horror. "While others age to death in moments," added the fourth member of their team, T4, nicknamed Tempo. A synthetic being with artificial emotional intelligence designed specifically for temporal operations. His metallic features shifted to display concern, the emotional subroutines perfectly mimicking human empathy. "The Chronological Agency has authorized an unprecedented operation," Lyra continued, bringing up the mission parameters. "We need to retrieve 100 million hours from the year 2450. Jin leaned forward. "That's nearly triple the largest withdrawal ever attempted. And well beyond the ethical extraction limit," Tempo noted, his ethical programming clearly troubled. "We don't have a choice," Lyra countered. "This isn't just about slowing the dilation anymore. It's about preventing complete chronological extinction." Maya studied the authorization codes. "The Temporal Guard in 2450 will fight back. They're designed to protect their timeline at all costs." "Which is why we need the best team," Lyra said, looking at each of them in turn. "Jin, You can hack any temporal lock ever created. Maya, you've fought temporal guards before and survived. Tempo, your emotional processing gives us an edge in understanding time ripples that human intuition misses. And you? Jin asked with a smirk. What makes you qualified to lead us, Professor? Lyra's face hardened as she pulled out her father's watch. Because I promised my father I'd finish what he started. He died discovering the source of these anomalies. She paused, the weight of her next words hanging in the air. The shockwave isn't natural. Someone is causing it, deliberately. The revelation silenced the room. We leave in 6 hours, Lyra concluded. Get ready for the most important temporal heist in human history. The temporal displacement chamber resembled a massive gyroscope suspended in liquid mercury. Its rings rotated in complex, seemingly random patterns that only made sense in 11-dimensional mathematics. Lyra helped Jin adjust his chronosuit, specialized gear designed to protect the wearer's personal timeline during displacement. Nervous? She asked, noticing his shaking hands. Terrified, he admitted with a forced laugh. But that's my default state before a jump. Jin's typical humor couldn't fully mask the fear in his eyes. Few people had traveled as far forward as 2450, and fewer still had returned intact. Maya checked her temporal disruptor, a weapon that could temporarily freeze an opponent's personal timeline. Tempo, run diagnostics one more time. I want to know every possible guard formation we might encounter. The synthetic being's eyes glowed as he processed billions of tactical scenarios. The 2450 guard will have chronological prediction capabilities. They'll know we're coming approximately 18 minutes before we arrive. Which gives them plenty of time to prepare a welcome party, Jin muttered. Lyra activated the main control panel. That's why we're not landing where they expect. We're using my father's theories on timeline fracturing to create a secondary entry point. Untested theories, Tempo cautioned. Theories that cost him his life to develop, Lyra countered, her voice breaking slightly. She steadied herself and continued. The extraction device is calibrated. Once we reach the temporal vault, we'll have exactly 43 minutes to extract the required hours and return before the displacement field collapses. The chamber began to hum louder as power surged through its structure. Mercury-like fluid rose around the platform where they stood, creating a perfect reflective surface that soon became translucent, then transparent, revealing glimpses of countless parallel moments in time. Remember, Lyra said as the machine reached critical threshold. We're not just stealing time. We're borrowing it to save everyone, including the people of 2450. If we fail, their timeline collapses too. The liquid chronofield engulfed them as Lyra activated the final sequence. Reality fragmented around them, their consciousness stretching across centuries in an instant. The world reassembled itself in blinding light. They materialized in what appeared to be an abandoned transit station, its architecture organic and flowing in ways that defied current engineering principles. Sunlight filtered through crystal-like structures overhead, casting rainbow patterns across the dusty floor. Temporal coordinates confirmed, Tempo announced, his systems recalibrating. December 3rd, 2450. We've arrived 2.7 kilometers from the temporal vault. Jin stumbled forward, his face pale. Time jump hangover is worse than I remembered, he groaned, leaning against a crystalline column. Keep it together, Maya urged, already scanning their surroundings with practiced efficiency. We need to move before... A piercing alarm cut through the air, its wail oscillating in an unnatural pattern that seemed to vibrate through their very bones. Before that happens, Jin finished for her. They've detected the temporal fracture, Lyra realized. Faster than I calculated. The guard will deploy temporal trackers, Tempo warned, his emotional circuits projecting urgency. We have approximately 12 minutes before they pinpoint our location. Lyra pulled up a holographic map of the city. Unlike the chaotic, desperate metropolis they'd left behind, this future version of Neo-Tokyo displayed harmonious planning. concentric circles of buildings arranged around a massive central structure that pulsed with blue-white energy. The temporal vault, she identified. Center of the city, heavily guarded. But that's not our target. She pointed to a smaller facility at the 3 o'clock position. This is a subsidiary storage node. Less security. Direct access to the main chronological reserves. Why aren't they protecting it better? Maya questioned. Suspicious. Because normal temporal thieves don't know it exists, Jin answered, studying the schematics. It's a maintenance channel, designed for emergency withdrawals during system rebalancing. He gave Lyra an appraising look. How did you know about this? My father's research, she replied simply. Let's move. They exited the abandoned station into a city that seemed to breathe. Buildings shifted subtly, accommodating the flow of citizens whose clothing and appearances varied wildly. Some nearly human, others clearly enhanced with technological or biological modifications. Most striking was the calm prosperity evident everywhere. No signs of the temporal crisis that plagued their present. They solved it, Maya whispered. Whatever caused the chronological disruption, they found a solution. Or they're the cause, Lyra countered darkly. They moved through service corridors and maintenance tunnels, avoiding the main thoroughfares where their outdated Chronos suits would immediately mark them as outsiders. Jin worked his technological magic at each security checkpoint, his fingers dancing across interfaces that seemed to anticipate his commands. Their security is adaptive, he muttered after bypassing the third checkpoint. It's learning from each hack. Can you stay ahead of it? Lyra asked. Barely, but we need to hurry. They emerged onto a narrow bridge, spanning between two tower-like structures. Below them, the city continued its harmonious existence, citizens moving with a deliberate grace that suggested a completely different relationship with time itself. Something's wrong, Tempo suddenly announced, his sensory systems on high alert. The temporal flow here is regulated. Lyra frowned. Explain. In our time, chronological flow is increasingly chaotic, speeding up, slowing down unpredictably. Here, it's being actively controlled, like water through a dam. The revelation sent a chill through the team. If time itself was being manipulated on this scale, the implications were staggering. You think they're causing our crisis? Maya asked, connecting the dots. Before Lyra could answer, the air before them shimmered. 3 figures materialized, wearing sleek uniforms emblazoned with a symbol resembling an hourglass encased in geometric patterns. Their faces were partially obscured by chronological field generators that gave them a ghostly, shifted appearance, existing simultaneously in multiple microseconds. Temporal guards. Chronological violators, the central figure announced, his voice echoing strangely as if reaching them from multiple points in time, simultaneously. You are attempting unauthorized temporal extraction. Surrender immediately. Maya drew her disruptor. We've been compromised. Jin, alternative route? Lyra demanded. The hacker was already working on his portable interface. Working on it. Need 30 seconds. Temporal shield, now, Lyra ordered. Tempo stepped forward, his synthetic body generating a chronological barrier that distorted the guard's perception of their exact position in time, making them appear to be microseconds away from where they actually stood. The lead guard raised his hand, activating a device that sent a pulse of concentrated temporal energy toward them. Where it struck the ground, matter aged instantly, concrete crumbling to dust. Time accelerator, Tempo identified. Direct hit will age organic matter approximately 80 years, in under 2 seconds. Wonderful, Jin muttered. Got it. Maintenance shaft, 2 levels down. Maya fired her disruptor, catching one guard in its field. The figure froze mid-motion, temporarily removed from the flow of time. That won't hold long, she warned, already backing toward the access point Jin had identified. The remaining guards advanced, their movements unpredictable as they phase-shifted through microseconds. Lyra activated her own defensive technology, a personal time field that allowed her to process information and react slightly faster than normal temporal progression. "Go," she ordered. "I'll cover." The team retreated, while Lyra deployed a chronological scrambler, a device that created localized temporal distortions, confusing the guard's perception. The lead guard pushed through the interference, his face becoming momentarily visible as his field generator faltered. Lyra gasped in recognition. "Professor Arcadius?" The man hesitated, his own eyes widening. "Lyra Vance, impossible." That moment of mutual shock gave Lyra the opportunity she needed. She triggered the scrambler's overload function and dove into the maintenance shaft after her team, the entrance sealing behind her as the device detonated, creating a bubble of accelerated time that would take the guards hours to navigate, though only minutes would pass for the team. They landed in a service corridor bathed in blue emergency lighting. Jin helped Lyra to her feet, while Maya secured their position. "You know him," Maya stated, rather than asked. "The guard." Lyra nodded, still processing the shock. "Professor Marius Arcadius. He was my mentor, my father's colleague and friend." She looked up, confusion evident in her expression. "He disappeared 2 years ago during a temporal experiment. We thought he died." "Apparently he just relocated to greener temporal pastures," Jin quipped, though his tone lacked its usual humor. "This complicates things," Tempo observed. "Personal connections create unpredictable variables in temporal operations." Lyra straightened, pushing aside her shock. "It changes nothing. We have a mission. The subsidiary node is 300 meters ahead." They proceeded through the maintenance corridors, encountering automated systems, but no additional guards. Jin worked his technological expertise on each security measure, though with increasing difficulty. "Their systems keep adapting," he explained, sweat beading on his forehead as he worked through a particularly complex chronological lock. "It's like they've specifically designed these defenses against my techniques." "How is that possible?" Maya asked. "If Arcadius is here, he knows how Jin works," Lyra reasoned. "He helped develop many of our hacking protocols." The lock finally yielded, revealing a circular chamber dominated by a crystalline structure that pulsed with energy. Rivers of light flowing through transparent conduits that extended in all directions. "The temporal node," Lyra whispered, approaching the structure with reverence. "Direct access to the vault's reserves." Jin immediately connected his equipment to an access point, his fingers flying across the interface. "I'm in, but they know we're here. Countermeasures are already activating." "How long until you can extract?" Lyra demanded. 7 minutes to establish the connection. Another 12 for the full extraction." "Too long," Maya warned, monitoring security protocols through her tactical display. "Guards will breach our position in under 5 minutes." Tempo approached the node, his synthetic hand hovering over its surface. "I can accelerate the process by directly interfacing with the chronological matrix." "That could damage your core systems," Lyra cautioned. "A necessary risk," the synthetic being replied, his emotional programming showing a determined resolve that seemed remarkably human. As Tempo connected to the matrix, the entire chamber hummed with increasing energy. The flowing rivers of light, pure crystallized time, began diverting toward their extraction device. "It's working," Jin confirmed. "Extraction at 42% capacity and climbing." Maya positioned herself at the entrance, weapon ready. "Whatever you're doing, do it faster. They're coming." Through Tempo's connection, they could see visualizations of the time they were extracting, glimpses of futures not yet lived, possibilities flowing like water into their containment unit. The synthetic being's face displayed strain, his emotional programming registering pain that should have been impossible for his kind. "Tempo, your systems are overloading," Lyra warned, monitoring his vital functions. "I am managing," he responded, voice fragmented. But there is something you should see. The visual feed from his connection shifted, showing not random futures, but deliberate patterns. The time flow wasn't natural. It was being harvested, collected, and stored in massive quantities. They're stockpiling time, Lyra realized, horror dawning on her face. Arcadius and the Temporal Guard. They're deliberately creating the crisis in our present by hoarding time here in the future. Extraction at 78%, Jin reported. But I'm seeing the same thing. They've been systematically draining chronological energy from our era for decades. The chamber door shuddered as something heavy impacted against it. Maya braced herself. Disruptor raised. They're here. Why? Lyra demanded, trying to understand. Why would they create a crisis that threatens everyone? The answer came from an unexpected source, a direct communication through Tempo's connection to the Matrix. Professor Arcadius's voice filled the chamber. Because survival requires sacrifice. Lyra, the many for the few, the weak present for the strong future. The door exploded inward. Temporal guards poured through, led by Arcadius himself, older, harder, but unmistakably the man who had once guided Lyra's education. "Stop the extraction!" he commanded his forces. "Secure the time reserves!" Maya engaged the first wave of guards, her disruptor creating pockets of frozen time that disoriented their coordinated attack. Jin continued the extraction process while simultaneously trying to secure their escape route. Lyra faced Arcadius directly. "You're killing billions of people!" "I'm saving humanity's future," he countered, his voice almost sorrowful. The chronological degradation was always going to happen. Lyra. Natural entropy of time itself. We simply accelerated and directed it. "By stealing time from the past, from us," she accused. "By preserving it for those who can use it wisely." He gestured around them. "Look at this world we've built. Perfect chronological harmony. No waste, no disorder. Built on theft and mass murder." Arcadius's expression hardened. "Your father understood, in the end. Why do you think he stopped fighting us?" The revelation struck Lyra like a physical blow. "What are you talking about? My father died trying to expose you." "Your father died because he couldn't accept the necessity of our work," Arcadius corrected. "He came to the future, just as you have. He saw what we built. But unlike you, he tried to destroy it all." A shadow of genuine regret crossed his features. "I had no choice. Lyra. Victor was my friend. But the future of humanity was at stake." Maya shouted from her position near the door, where she struggled to hold back the advancing guards. "Extraction at 93%. We need to go." Tempo, still connected to the Matrix, suddenly convulsed. "Warning, detecting chronological countermeasures. They're trying to trace our return coordinates. If they follow us back, they'll stop us from deploying the extracted time," Jin warned. Lyra's mind raced, weighing impossible options. The time they'd extracted would save billions. But if Arcadius and his forces followed them back, it would all be for nothing. "Tempo, can you disrupt their tracking capability?" she asked. "Temporarily," the synthetic being confirmed. "But it would require maintaining my connection to the Matrix during our departure, effectively leaving part of my consciousness here. You'd be divided across time periods," Lyra realized. "That could destroy your core personality matrix." "A necessary sacrifice," Tempo replied, his artificial features showing a very human resolve. Before Lyra could protest further, Jin shouted, "Extraction complete, 100 million hours secured." "Time to go, Professor," Maya called, firing her disruptor continuously to keep the guards at bay. Arcadius stepped forward. "You can't win this, Lyra. Even if you escape with the time you've stolen, it's merely a temporary solution. The chrono shockwave is inevitable." "Maybe," Lyra acknowledged, activating their return sequence. "But I'll find another way, one that doesn't sacrifice billions for your utopia." The temporal displacement field began to form around the team. Tempo, still connected to the Matrix, looked at Lyra with an expression of calm acceptance. "I will remain connected long enough to disrupt their tracking systems," he stated. "You will have approximately 17 hours before they can follow." "Tempo." "No," Lyra began. "It is the logical solution," the synthetic being insisted. "And it feels right. Is this what humans call purpose, Dr. Vance?" Before she could answer, the displacement field intensified. The last thing Lyra saw was Arcadius's face, not angry, but sad, as if watching a child make a terrible mistake. Then reality fractured once more, hurling them back across centuries. The return to 2187 was violent. The temporal displacement chamber sparked and shuddered as the team materialized, the extraction device glowing with the concentrated time they'd retrieved. Jin collapsed immediately, blood trickling from his nose, a sign of temporal stress. Maya managed to remain standing, but looked disoriented, her movements sluggish. Lyra, despite her own discomfort, rushed to the control console. Status of the Chronos shockwave. The technicians who had been monitoring their absence looked grim. 64 minutes until impact. It's accelerated since your departure. They're pushing it, Lyra realized. Arcadius knows what we've done. He's trying to trigger the collapse before we can deploy the extracted time. "Where's Tempo?" one of the technicians asked, noticing the synthetic being's absence. "He stayed behind to cover our escape," Maya explained, her voice hollow. "He's sacrificed himself." Jin, regaining consciousness, struggled to his feet. "Not entirely. If I know Tempo, he's created a partitioned consciousness. Part of him is still fighting in 2450, but he would have embedded a backup in the extraction device." Lyra immediately examined the device. Sure enough, a secondary data pattern was intertwined with the harvested time, Tempo's essence, compressed and fragmented, but present. "Can we restore him?" she asked. Jin shook his head. "Not fully. Not soon. But we might be able to access his memory, find out what he learned while connected to their system." "Later," Maya interrupted. "Right now, we need to deploy the extracted time before the shockwave hits." The Chronological Agency's central deployment facility resembled a massive inverted pyramid, descending deep beneath the city. At its base lay the Chronological Distribution Network, the infrastructure that maintained Earth's increasingly fragile relationship with time itself. Lyra supervised as technicians connected their extraction device to the network. Jin, despite his weakened condition, worked alongside them, ensuring the interface remained stable. "The time we've extracted is pure, concentrated," he explained to the lead technician. "It's like injecting undiluted chronological energy directly into the system. The network needs to be calibrated to distribute it gradually, or we risk overcorrection." "How long until deployment?" Lyra asked. 20 minutes for proper calibration," the technician responded. "Then another 15 for full distribution." Maya, monitoring the approaching shockwave, shook her head. "The wave hits in 35 minutes. We're cutting it too close." "We don't have a choice," Lyra responded. "Rush deployment could cause chronological rejection. The time we've extracted could rebound, making things worse." As they worked, Lyra extracted a small data module from the extraction device, the fragmented essence of Tempo. She connected it to a secure terminal, hoping to access whatever information the synthetic being had gathered during his connection to the future's temporal matrix. Fragmented data scrolled across her screen, broken insights into the future they'd visited. One recurring symbol caught her attention: Project Hourglass. References to controlled chronological regression and selective temporal preservation. "Jin," she called, "look at this." The hacker studied the data, his expression darkening. "This isn't just about stockpiling time. They're planning to let the shockwave happen, then use their reserves to revive only selected portions of the population." He looked up at Lyra. "They're going to let billions die, then rebuild civilization with only those they deem worthy. Arcadius always was an elitist, Lyra said bitterly. He believes in quality over quantity, the best minds, the strongest bodies, preserved for the future. Genocide on an unprecedented scale, Maya concluded. A technician interrupted their grim realization. Dr. Vance, we're ready to begin deployment. Lyra moved to the main control platform. Initiate gradual distribution. Monitor chronological acceptance at all nodes. The process began, harvested time flowing into the global network, strengthening the weakened fabric of the present. Monitors showed an immediate positive response, the erratic fluctuations in temporal flow beginning to stabilize. It's working, Jin confirmed. Chronological integrity improving at 7%, 12%. Then alarms blared throughout the facility. Security personnel rushed to defensive positions as a temporal distortion formed at the center of the chamber. Impossible, Maya gasped. They couldn't have tracked us this quickly. Tempo's disruption should have given us 17 hours, Jin agreed. The distortion coalesced into a single figure, Professor Arcadius, his temporal field generator allowing him to project himself across time without physically traveling. A chronological projection, Lyra identified. He's not really here, just an image. Lyra. Arcadius's projection addressed her directly. You've made a terrible mistake. I've prevented your genocide, she countered. You've condemned humanity to a slow, painful decline. He corrected. The time you've stolen will delay the inevitable by mere decades. But now, without those reserves, the future I showed you can never exist. We'll find another way, Lyra insisted. One that doesn't sacrifice billions. Arcadius shook his head. There is no other way. Time itself is a finite resource. Lyra. Physics that even your brilliant father couldn't circumvent. His projection flickered. I didn't want to do this, but you've left me no choice. If we can't recover what you've stolen, we'll have to take more. Much more. The implications chilled Lyra to her core. You wouldn't. We're activating the chronological harvester, Arcadius confirmed. Instead of a gradual extraction over decades, we'll take everything we need in one catastrophic event. The shockwave you've been fighting? Consider it a gentle breeze compared to the temporal hurricane we're about to unleash. Jin looked up from his console in horror. If they do that, it won't just freeze people in time. It will erase them completely from the timeline. Billions of lives not just ended, but never having existed at all. You have 30 minutes, Arcadius continued. Return what you've taken, surrender your technology, and I'll ensure you and your selected associates have a place in the future we're building. His gaze softened slightly. For your father's sake, Lyra, he would have wanted you to survive. The projection vanished, leaving stunned silence in its wake. Can they really do what he's threatening? Maya asked. Jin was already analyzing data from Tempo's fragmented memory. Theoretically, yes. A chronological harvester would create a temporal vacuum, sucking chronological energy from an entire era. He looked up, face pale. It would be like our present never happened. Options? Lyra demanded, refusing to surrender to despair. We could return the time we've extracted, a technician suggested timidly. And condemn billions to death by Arcadius's selection process? No. Lyra studied the deployment system. What if we accelerated the deployment? Push all 100 million hours into the system at once? The network can't handle that kind of surge, Jin warned. It would cause chronological rejection, possibly making things worse. Unless, Lyra said slowly, an idea forming. We don't just deploy the time. We use it to create a chronological firewall. Jin caught on immediately. A temporal barrier against their harvester. He ran calculations on his console. It could work, but we'd need to reconfigure the entire network in minutes. And even then, the barrier would eventually collapse. How long would it hold? Maya asked. Hours, maybe days, Jin estimated. Not a permanent solution, but enough time to develop one, Lyra concluded. If we can hold off their harvester, we can work on a true chronological stabilization method, one that doesn't rely on stealing from the future or sacrificing the present. They worked frantically, reconfiguring the deployment system to create a temporal barrier rather than simply releasing the harvested time back into the flow. Jin, despite his weakening condition, pushed himself to the limit, his expertise in chronological systems proving invaluable. "I've isolated the frequency of their harvester," he announced, after several intense minutes. "Based on Tempo's data, we can create a precisely tuned barrier." "How much time do we have?" Lyra asked, checking the countdown to Arcadius's deadline. 12 minutes, Maya reported. "And I'm detecting temporal distortions forming throughout the city. They're preparing for something big." The facility shuddered, chronometers throughout the chamber, suddenly accelerating wildly before returning to normal speed. "Preliminary tests of their harvester," Jin identified. "They're calibrating it for maximum extraction." Lyra made a decision. "Deploy the barrier now. We can't wait any longer." Jin hesitated. "The tuning isn't perfect. If we deploy now, the barrier will be unstable. Someone will need to manually adjust it as the harvester attacks, from inside the chronological field." "Meaning?" Maya pressed. "Meaning whoever does it will experience time differently from everyone else," Jin explained grimly. "Years might pass for them, while only hours pass for us, or vice versa." "I'll do it," Lyra volunteered immediately. "No," Jin countered. "I'm already showing signs of chronological degradation from our jump. The time dilation will kill you, but my system is already compromised. I might survive it." Before Lyra could argue, Jin activated the deployment sequence and stepped into the central chamber, where the extracted time was being processed. The crystalline energy enveloped him as the barrier began to form, a shimmering field of pure chronological force expanding outward from the facility. "Jin!" Lyra cried out. But it was too late. He was sealed within the field, his movements already showing signs of temporal distortion, sometimes accelerating, sometimes slowing to near immobility. The facility trembled again, more violently this time. Outside, the sky darkened as if a storm were gathering, but this was no ordinary tempest. The very fabric of reality seemed to bend and warp as Arcadius's harvester engaged. "Chronological harvester detected," a technician reported, voice shaking. "Impact in 30 seconds." Through the barrier's transparent surface, Lyra could see Jin working frantically, adjusting controls that regulated the chronological field's frequency. His body flickered between moments, sometimes appearing older, sometimes younger, as the time distortions affected him directly. The harvester struck with apocalyptic force. The barrier shuddered but held, Jin's adjustments keeping it precisely tuned to the attacking frequency. Outside the facility, chronometers went wild, some spinning backward, others accelerating impossibly forward. But the catastrophic timeline erasure Arcadius had threatened didn't materialize. "The barrier is holding," Maya confirmed. "Harvester effectiveness reduced to 17% and dropping." Within the field, Jin continued his work, though each movement clearly caused him pain. Lyra watched helplessly as decades seemed to pass for him in minutes, his hair graying, skin wrinkling, then reversing back to youth as chronological waves washed over him. "We need to get him out of there," Lyra insisted. "If we break the field now, the barrier collapses," a technician warned. "The harvester would have full effect." For nearly an hour, the temporal battle raged, Arcadius's harvester pounding against the barrier Jin maintained through increasingly erratic adjustments. Finally, the assault subsided, the atmospheric distortions gradually fading. "Harvester activity decreasing," Maya reported. "They're pulling back." Lyra immediately ordered the barrier field opened. Jin collapsed as the chronological energy dissipated, his body showing the severe effects of temporal distortion, cells aging and rejuvenating in random patterns. Medical personnel rushed to stabilize him as Lyra knelt by his side. "You idiot," she whispered. "Why did you do that?" Jin managed a weak smile, his face momentarily young again, before a wave of aging swept over it. "Someone had to. Besides, I had my reasons." He gripped her hand with surprising strength. "Lyra, I accessed more of Tempo's memories while in the field. There's something you need to know about Arcadius." "Save your strength," she urged. "No time," he insisted, his voice fading. "Arcadius is my father." The revelation stunned Lyra. "What? How is that possible?" "Born 2156, Jin explained, each word clearly painful. "Mother died in childbirth. He raised me until I was 10. Then disappeared during a temporal experiment. I thought he abandoned me. Turns out, he just moved to a better neighborhood. The future." The pieces clicked into place. Jin's unparalleled talent with chronological systems. Arcadius's personal interest in stopping them. The security systems that seemed specifically designed against Jin's techniques. "That's why you became a Chronos hunter," Lyra realized. "You were looking for him." Jin nodded weakly. "Found him. Not worth it." His body convulsed as another temporal wave washed through him. "The barrier will hold for 63 hours. After that, they'll try again." "We'll be ready," Lyra promised. "We'll find a permanent solution." "Already have," Jin whispered. He pressed something into her hand. A small data crystal. Tempo found it. The real solution. Not stealing time. Creating it. His body flickered once more between youth and age before stabilizing, frozen in a state neither young nor old, but somehow outside normal chronological progression. "He's in chronological stasis," the medical chief announced. "His personal timeline has paused." "Can you reverse it?" Lyra asked, though she already suspected the answer. "Not with current technology," the doctor admitted. "But in this state, he could remain stable indefinitely until we develop the means." Maya placed a hand on Lyra's shoulder. "We need to focus on what he gave you. If there's really a way to create chronological energy rather than just redistributing it." Lyra studied the data crystal. "Get me a secure terminal and contact the agency's directors. If this is what I think it is, we need to implement it immediately." For the next 48 hours, Lyra barely left the laboratory. The data Jin had extracted from Tempo's memories contained fragmentary research, begun by her father, expanded upon in secret by scientists across multiple eras, including, ironically, a younger Arcadius before his obsession with selective preservation took hold. "It's brilliant," she explained to the assembled agency directors. "Instead of treating time as a finite resource that can only be redistributed, this approach creates new chronological energy through controlled fusion of potential timelines." "Theoretical timelines?" one director questioned skeptically. "Quantum possibilities," Lyra clarified. "Every decision point creates multiple potential realities. This method harvests the chronological energy from those unrealized possibilities without disrupting existing timelines." "Can it be implemented before the barrier fails?" asked another. Lyra nodded. "The prototype is already being constructed. We'll have 15 hours to spare." As the directors departed, Maya approached Lyra privately. "What aren't you telling them?" Lyra smiled faintly at her perceptiveness. "The system requires an initialization sequence, a chronological seed. We need pure, concentrated temporal energy to kickstart the process. The time we extracted from the future," Maya realized, "we'd have to give it back." "Not back to Arcadius," Lyra clarified. "But yes, we'd need to release it in a very specific pattern to catalyze the reaction. After everything we went through to get it, all the lives it's currently saving." "I know," Lyra acknowledged. "But if this works, we won't need that stolen time anymore. We'll be generating new chronological energy, enough for everyone, present and future." The decision weighed heavily on both of them. Using the extracted time would temporarily worsen conditions, potentially costing lives, before the new system could compensate. But the alternative was perpetual dependency on chronological theft, or eventually succumbing to Arcadius's harvester. In the end, there was only one ethical choice. The chronological harmonizer, as they named the new device, resembled a massive inverted pendulum suspended over a quantum field generator. Unlike the brutal efficiency of the temporal extraction technology, this machine hummed with a gentle resonance, its components moving in perfect synchronization. Barrier integrity at 27% and falling, a technician reported. Estimated failure in 90 minutes. "Harvester activity detected," added another. "They're preparing for another assault." Lyra stood at the main control platform, the final sequence awaiting her authorization. Maya beside her, both fully aware of what the next few hours would bring. "When we release the extracted time, there will be a chronological backlash," Lyra warned everyone present. "Protect your personal timelines however you can." She looked at the stasis pod where Jin remained suspended between moments, and at the data crystal containing Tempo's fragmented consciousness. Both had sacrificed themselves to bring them to this point. "Initialize the harmonizer," she commanded. "Release the chronological catalyst." The extracted time, 100 million hours of pure temporal energy, flowed from its containment into the harmonizer's core. Immediately, the facility's chronometers began to fluctuate wildly. Outside, the sky darkened once more as time itself seemed to hesitate, caught between competing forces. The harvester struck just as the barrier failed completely, its full force bearing down on the present. For terrifying moments, reality itself seemed to waver, people and objects flickering between states of existence as their timelines were threatened with erasure. Lyra held firm at her station, even as her own body experienced temporal distortions, moments of her past and potential futures bleeding into her present. She saw herself as a child, as an old woman, as someone who had made different choices at critical junctures. Then, precisely as the theoretical models had predicted, the harmonizer achieved quantum resonance. New chronological energy began to flow outward from the device, not stolen from the future or past, but genuinely new, created from the infinite potential of unrealized timelines. The effect was immediate and profound. The harvester's assault faltered, then failed completely as the newly generated time reinforced the present. Chronometers throughout the city stabilized for the first time in years. The unnatural aging that had plagued the population halted. In the projection that formed above the harmonizer, Lyra could see Arcadius's face, first shocked, then thoughtful, and finally showing a reluctant admiration. "Impossible," his projection whispered. "You've changed the fundamental equations." "My father's final gift," Lyra responded. "The answer was never to steal time, but to create it." "You realize what you've done?" Arcadius asked. "You've eliminated scarcity from the temporal economy. The future we built was beautiful but built on suffering," Lyra finished for him. "Now you can build it again, but without the cost." The projection flickered as the temporal connection weakened. "Jin," Arcadius said suddenly, his composure cracking. "My son, is he—" "Alive," Lyra answered. "In stasis, but alive. He saved us all, including you." Something like genuine emotion crossed Arcadius's face before his projection dissolved completely. The temporal connection between eras severing as the new chronological paradigm took hold. 1 year later, Lyra stood on the observation deck of the newly constructed temporal observatory, named in honor of her father. Below, the city pulsed with healthy chronological energy. Time flowing at its natural, intended pace. The harmonizer had exceeded all expectations, generating more than enough chronological energy to stabilize not just the present, but to begin healing the damage done by decades of temporal extraction. Scientists worldwide were already developing secondary applications, medical treatments to reverse unnatural aging, environmental restoration techniques, even limited and ethical time travel without the moral cost of theft. Maya joined her at the railing. The latest readings are promising. Chronological integrity at 97% and still improving. And Jin? Lyra asked. The new treatment is showing results. His personal timeline is beginning to restabilize. The doctors are optimistic. Lyra nodded, relief evident in her expression. And tempo? His consciousness reconstruction is at 64%. The synthetic body will be ready by the time we complete the restoration. In her pocket, Lyra carried her father's old watch, still keeping perfect time, a reminder of what they had fought for. She also carried something else, a message that had arrived through the diminishing temporal connection just before it closed completely. From Arcadius, dated 2450. The harmonizer works. It read simply, "The future is changed. Both worlds saved. Perhaps one day, we will meet in a timeline where we are not enemies." The idea gave her hope that even across the vast gulf of centuries, reconciliation remained possible. That time, rather than a resource to be hoarded or stolen, could be what it was always meant to be, a gift to be shared. She looked up at the sky, where stars were beginning to appear as evening fell. Somewhere in that vast expanse of space and time, countless potential futures awaited, not predestined, but to be shaped by choices yet unmade. "What now?" Maya asked, following her gaze upward. Lyra smiled. "Now we build a future worth having, one moment at a time."